So let me introduce Evert. Evert-Jan Ouweneel is Dutch. He's been married for 21 years to Aniko and is a father of 3 children, ages 19, 16 and 14. Since 2009, he's served as a senior advisor in public engagement on faith and secular contexts in fundraising offices of World Vision. His current role is to inform people in secular societies about the need for faith literacy. That simply means understanding people of other faiths, and the importance of collaborating with religious leaders when building towards a more peaceful and prosperous world. Evert has studied sociology, psychology, and graduated in philosophy at the Free University in Amsterdam. He's written over 50 articles in Dutch and some English articles on a variety of Christian and secular topics. He's a very appreciated speaker in the Netherlands. He's known for what are called theatre seminars on major issues like world history, world religions, and world trends. He also speaks regularly in churches and Christian organisations and at Christian events. Let's welcome Evert as he comes to share with us.
A very good evening to all of you. Thank you so much for coming. Based on a couple of comments on the radio, wow, I'm amazed. So you even didn't mind seeing the word prophetic. Probably you were curious what that on earth would mean this evening. I hope it doesn't sound like it's not of this earth. I hope that even if you don't share a Christian view on, or a Jewish view or other views on prophetic, that it's quite doable to be a prophet. You don't need to have a particular faith, let's say religious faith, to be a prophet. You can have other kinds of faith. And based on that faith, actually refer to something else in your lifestyle. So we want to end with that. 7 prophetic stands, but you need to have a reason to talk about 7 prophetic stands. And the assumption, the starting point of this evening is that we're all a bit nervous in the West. Did you notice? There is some nervousness going on. And I travel across the world, and I can tell you it's mostly a Western nervousness. It's not so much a nervousness that you would find in Asia, in Africa, perhaps a little bit in Latin America. It's typically Western. So I want to point out and try to explain how this Western nervousness is, how it's characterized. What does it look like? Why are we nervous? And I will do that in 3 ways. And 3 features of this huge storm, and then after that I will give you 7 inspiring ways to respond to the storm. Because this is always the question that rises when you are in a storm, and that is what to do in a storm. You know, if you're in a storm and you feel insecure, your body will always have answers. Your biology will take over and will exactly tell you what to do. So, you know, we have a lot of biological self-defense mechanisms. We have a lot of, natural responses to insecurity. The big question is, do we want those mechanisms to take over in our lives? Do we want to get, for example, in the survival mode of an animal? Or do we want to stick to our humanity and stay compassionate, hopeful human beings? Do you want biology to take over in the storm, or do we want the spirit or the mind, or whatever you call it, to take over in the storm? That's the question. And then my suggestions are 7 ways of allowing our spirit to respond rather than our body. Right? That's it. That's the program for this evening. So here we go. We go to the next first slide, and here are the 3 features of the storm. And as you can see, I love a particular car brand. Well, it just happened to look like it. I'm from the Netherlands, friends. Whatever works for the German economy works for the Dutch economy. It's in my interest that there are as many German cars sold as possible, because 40% of our export in the Netherlands goes to Germany. It better goes well with Germany for us. Here we go. What I want to share with you is a kind of this combination of factors, starting with us living on a vulnerable planet, with planetary issues that don't get smaller. They continue to be planetary issues. And all these issues, they require global cooperation. But at the same time, as we face all these planetary issues, the West is losing grip on the world, and we're losing control. And then, third piece, as we are losing control and we feel more insecure, we lack the resilience to actually cope with that insecurity. Because all the big perspectives that we had in the past and that helped us cope with insecurity, with setbacks, with threats, we abandoned them. So we're quite empty-handed to cope with insecurity. We have one gospel left. If it's going to be, it's up to me. And if you can't control your life, there's no plan B. Try harder. This is the mixture I want to describe. Vulnerable planet, which we share with the rest of the planet. We're all on the same vulnerable planet. But then the West is losing control on that planet. And then we have difficulty to cope with the insecurity as a result of that. Got it? Sounds like a storm, right? Sounds like something we need to cope with. Now, what I will describe now is a bunch of issues that you will see on a planetary scale. If you look at the issues, you might start thinking that I'm a pessimist and that I see a lot of doom scenarios popping up. I'm not talking today about things going down the drain. I'm not giving you a pep talk and say everything will be all right. What I'm talking about tonight is a higher level of uncertainty. It's not, the point tonight is not that things will go wrong or go well. The thing is that we are now challenged by the fact that there are growing uncertainties in our lives and that we will have to deal with that. The thing is that we don't know if it is going to end well. That's the point. We don't know if it's going wrong, so there's no blind pessimism either needed, but you don't know it will be going well or going better, that your children will have it better. You don't know. Higher level of insecurity, uncertainty, and that's the kind of mental exercise that we are right in right now as a Western countries, especially as Western countries. So here we go. Part 1, vulnerable planet. And here's the first thing I would like to draw your attention to. For the first time in 5,000 years, the whole world needs to work together to get the whole planet in order. Friends, that's a newcomer. That's new. Look at the Romans having a nice peace around the Mediterranean Sea. They didn't care what the Han Chinese were doing. The Mayas having a nice spot on the other side of the ocean. You know, all these empires in the past, they didn't have to deal with the other empires. They could fight with the empires, but they weren't concerned about having joint interests with other empires. They didn't need to work together to get the whole planet in order. Now we do. And I give you a nice list of uplifting issues that should point that out. Look at this. The one even more thrilling than the other one. Okay, here we go. Climate change. That's pretty obvious, right? You don't do that. You don't solve that on a national level. Slavery, refugees, pandemics, resource scarcity, human trafficking, migrations, cybercrime. Actually, I should say cyber threats, because governments can be evil as well these days. So it's not only criminals, unless you call entire governments criminals. Nuclear risks, which are not only nuclear power stations, but also some loose weapons owned by unstable governments. Drink water, international criminality, global terrorism. This is bad advice. If you want to be a very effective criminal, here it comes. If you really want to be a very successful criminal, be as international as you can be. You know why? Because there's no international police. There's only national police forces, and they refuse to cooperate. Even in Europe, they have tough time, the French and Americans and the Germans, to share sensitive information with each other. You know, even in Europe, within the European Union, it's difficult, let alone with the rest of the world. Go international. Nobody will catch you. Make sure you're in 20 countries. You see? You don't solve this with a national perspective. You will have to cooperate. You will have to go global if you want to end up with a solution. Same with pandemics. Just wait for the first one. You know, it's patient. It's patient. It will wait. If you don't solve it this year, if you're not proactive this year, just wait for it. But it's a risk that is there. And so you have all these things that require global solutions and global corporations. So here's the good thing in this. The planet requires that we overcome our differences. Doesn't that sound flower power? Isn't that beautiful? The planet is right now forcing us to overcome our differences. The planet is calling for cooperation, for alignment, for overcoming differences, for reconciliation. The planet requires it. You know what the current trend right now is? Towards nationalism, towards protectionism. So the planet is shouting for joint solutions, and nations are busy becoming nationalistic. Nations are busy closing the curtains, pretending the rest of the world doesn't count. It's a surreal combination of events. The planet shouting for international solutions, and whole countries, Western countries, getting away with did I say shouting for international solutions, and whole countries getting away with trying to be national? Well, sure, you can get away with some rhetorics for a while, but the planet is patient. The issues won't go away. And when you look at climate change, wait a year and the bill gets higher. So the planet is patiently waiting until we get a solution. And every year we wait, the bill gets higher. And every time we try to solve it with nationalism, give it some time and the politicians will disappoint. Because here's another issue, and that is that if you look at these politicians, they're actually in an impossible position. Because they don't control their own country anymore. The weird thing in our situation, in our time, is that we still think 19th century. We still think in terms of national sovereignty, with politicians taking care of their own country. So we hold governments responsible for the well-being of our nation. But most of the well-being of our nations isn't determined anymore by national politics. It's determined by what's happening on the whole planet. So what you see right now is this very uncomfortable combination that we're all looking at politicians to solve the growing insecurity and things that are not going well. And the politicians can only find international solutions if they want lasting solutions. But they can't do that. They can't refer to something else because they are responsible for the nation. So you see a very weird combination, very weird situation where national politicians are forced to pretend that they can take care of the nation. Even though world economy is determining most of the flow of their economy. Even though climate change is determining most of what's going on in the country. But they have to pretend, 19th century thinking, that in a sovereign nation, they can take care of themselves. So what do you see? You see politicians moving to the right, trying to preserve as much as we have. So all over the West, we see a move to the right. And that brings me to the next point. Here's another question. What does it mean to be a democracy and a sovereign nation in a time like this? Leave that for you. Here's the next point. Loss of control in the West. So what I said was that for the first time in 5,000 years, we need to work together as a whole world to get the whole planet in order. Here's another one. For the first time in 500 years, the West needs to share its wealth and power with the rest. Here we have an inconvenient coincidence. And that is precisely when the world is reorganizing itself on an unprecedented scale, the West is losing its grip on it. You see the nervousness? The planet needs to be reorganized. We need to think different if we want to solve planetary issues. That requires huge decisions. You want to sit at the best seat on the table. And precisely now we're losing grip. Wrong moment for the West to lose its grip. This is precisely the moment where you want to control the world and put it the way you want it to be. And we don't. We can't. We have to start learning that we don't control the world anymore, that we don't control world economy anymore. We have to learn that we'll have to share power and wealth with the rest again. And it's a painful process. Western citizens call upon their leaders to restore the security of the past, and here's the problem with the politicians. On the one hand, they're supposed to take care of these insecurities and fix the nation. On the other hand, most of the well-being and the flow of the nation is not decided by them. And so they can only disappoint. Give it some time, And the promises of the politicians will not come true. Because whatever they say to fix an economy, for example, will not be determined by them to an important extent. And so it's a weird time. If you really want to have lasting solutions, you will have to think global. If a Western politician wants to be honest, a Western politician would have to say, but most of what our economy decides and determines depends on the rest. If you want me to take care of you, I will have to make deals with the rest. If you want me to take care of you in a sustainable way, not in a short-sighted way, but have sustainable well-being and stability for you, I will have to make sure the planet is in order. This is the weird stuff that we face right now. We need to get the planet in order to make sure the Australians are doing well. We need to get the whole planet in order to make sure the Dutch do well. Our self-interest has become global interest, and you can't separate the two anymore. Foreign affairs are internal affairs are foreign affairs. The gap is gone. You can't talk about self-interest of a country without taking the rest into consideration. If you really want to take care of Australia and the Netherlands, make sure the planet is in order, because that will eventually decide whether things go well or wrong. And so we are still in the 19th century with our thinking. We think nations. We think nations taking care of themselves. You know what happened was actually the world got global, but our narratives stayed local. We didn't upgrade our narratives. We didn't upgrade our thinking. We see the whole world globalizing. World economy, climate, everything is interconnected, but we're still thinking as if we're only independent entities. So what we need to do is upgrade our narrative. It's now time that we start to think global. If you really want to have a vision in 2017, think about the planet you want to live on in 2050. And then think back what that would mean for Australia. That's a vision for today. Don't think that you can have a vision for Australia independent and disconnected from the rest of the world. What kind of planet do you want? And what does that mean for Australia? That's a new way of thinking, but that's not what we do. Because we have a 19th century way of thinking for a 21st century situation. Upgrade it, skip a century, go straight into the 21st century, and you will know that there's only one ideology left, and that is, what kind of planet do you want to live on? And what does it take to get there? And that's the new way of thinking, but it's too big for us. Our mind is not there yet. Our mind is still thinking national. So it's a fascinating situation, but let's face it, even though we try nationalistic solutions, all rhetorics will not make the planetary issues go away. You can try it. You can try to close the curtains. You can try to be protectionist, but the planet is patient. The issues are too global and too stubborn. They won't go away. So here's what I want to say about losing control in the West. Have you studied this in the meantime? Do you see what it is? This is 2,000 years of economy, of global economy, and the percentage of each country in that, for each year. What is the percentage, the share of each country in the global economy? And now, here comes a surprising thing. Do you see there? That's year 0 at the beginning, or year 1, whatever you want. Do you see which are the biggest economies there? Which ones? India and China. What have you heard about India and China in your history lessons? Not a lot, probably. Which empire got the most attention in your history lessons? The Roman Empire. Let me show you the Roman Empire. Here's the Roman Empire. So, 2,000 years ago, the Roman Empire had no less than 10% of the world economy, whereas India and China together had almost 2/3 of world economy. Now comes the point. That lasts for 1,800 years. For 1,800 years, India and China are the biggest economies in the world. Then the rules of the game change, because these 1,800 years, your share in the world economy was determined by the size of your population. But then the rules changed because, around 1800, it was industrialization that would determine your share in the world economy. And suddenly a few new players could become the hero. And you see that the ones industrializing the first, they can, have their new share in the world economy. They grow and they become the new heroes. And you can see that both India and China are not industrializing, and they are losing big time. They are industrializing way too late, and it was very difficult for them to do that. Very slow industrialization process. And so, for a few hundred years, only 200 years, the West could dominate the world economy. And now you will see that China and India, let's see what happens to India, but especially China, is now catching up, industrializing, and going back to its own old dominant role in the world economy. And so what you see if you look at this picture is that it is not a new thing that China is the biggest economy in the world. It's the normal thing given the last 2,000 years. It's normal for China to be the biggest economy. Same with India. So when they are back in number 1 and 2, it's business as usual. And only these Westerners, with their tiny countries, they could be the hero for only 200 years because they were earlier in industrializing. And when they are going back and, having a smaller share in the world economy, it's just because they're not big enough. And they just had an advantage of 200 years. And after some time, the advantage will be gone and it will be back to normal. And what we face right now is that, normalization of the situation of the last 2,000 years. It's a normalization process, but it hurts. Because we got used to the security that we created by being the controllers of the world economy. If you have the power, the economic power and the military power, as we had in the last decade, sure you can get away with the best deals. Sure you can have the most lucrative businesses. Sure you can have. What's the consequences of best deals and lucrative businesses? A lot of job security. Sure, you have the security in the area of work, of health and care, because you control the world. So what happens now? We're losing control, and we're losing job security, and we're freaking out over it. We're panicking because the world is normalizing. It's going back to the situation of the last 2,000 years, and we will have to get used that we don't create that same security that we had in the past. And the sentiment is as if we are being robbed. We feel being robbed by other countries that are gradually gaining a bigger part of the welfare cake. And we will have to get used that we are playing not the first violin anymore. Here's another piece, 2014, biggest economies, US, China, Japan, Germany, UK, France, Brazil, etc. 2050, first biggest economies, China, US, India, Indonesia, Japan, Germany, Brazil, Mexico. You see, the Europeans are moving out of the list. Here's an even more dramatic one. If you believe the World Bank, then you can see that in 2050, there are only 3 giants left, which is China, India, and the United States. And if the European Union manages to blow up itself, which is doing quite well right now, there are only dwarfs left. There are only dwarfs left. This is the surreal thing about Brexit, that the United Kingdom without EU is a dwarf. But it behaves as if it is the old empire with the same leverage as in the past. You don't. You're a dwarf. Can you please wait for Indonesia with the free trade because they're bigger than you? Can you wait for Japan, for Russia? Can you wait for Mexico? UK will be smaller. If you look at this list and you take out the European Union and the G8 would gather in 2050, there will be no European economy at the table. G8, no European country. European countries are nothing without each other. This is why you need the European Union. It's not anymore for peace, it's for power. The only way the European countries can be a match for China, India, and the United States is by joining forces. And so this is what you see, these kind of shifts, these kind of new rationales for grouping, for joining forces, and perhaps Latin America might do something similar. Some Asian countries might do something similar. I don't know what you want to be part of, but you're at the end of the list. Fix it, settle it, sort it out. But we're all dwarfs if we don't cooperate. So probably a likely scenario is that you will have big groups of countries joining forces, creating free markets internally, and that in the end the world is governed by the leaders of these big groups. And some are big enough to be on their own. Others, like the Europeans, are all small and they need each other. But it hurts that you are not big enough anymore as a European country to sort things out by yourself. And we have to go through the painful mourning process of saying goodbye to national sovereignty. It's a mourning process. Yes, we will have to work together, and that means loss of sovereignty. And that will be the new kind of language that we need to speak, the language of us that is bigger than a nation, us being a group of nations, and us being the planetary collection of nations. We need to upskill our thinking, but we're not there yet. Here's another one. This is the middle class in the world. You see 2000? Look at this. This is all Western middle class in 2000. Now, easily half, if not 2/3. Look at that, 2050. Yellow and orange is European middle class. The rest under it is Asian middle class. There's another one even more dramatic. 2010, you can see that 2/3 of the middle class people is in, am I still there? Yeah, look at this. 2/3 of middle class is from Europe or America in 2010. 2030, 20 years later, 2/3 of the middle class will be in Asia. Friends, in 20 years' time, 2/3 of the middle class will shift from being a Western middle class to being an Eastern middle class. Here's what makes us nervous. What do you think that the economy will do? That global economic entities like multinationals, what do you think they want to focus on in the future if they want to build products for the global market? Do you think they will listen to what Westerners want or what Asians want? If Hollywood produces a film, what do you think the plot will be? Will it be a Western plot or an Eastern plot? I have bad news for you. All the heroes die in Asian movies. So you will prepare for miserable plots as soon as Hollywood has more customers in Asia. But this is what happens. The things are changing, the landscape is changing, and there are a few that are the losers of that process. Namely the ones that used to control and now have to settle for a smaller piece. If you want to understand the West, think of this. We have very little to gain and very much to lose. This is explaining a lot. We have little to gain and very much to lose. Politicians can't promise golden futures anymore. It can't be much better than it is. But we can lose a lot. And so what you see is conservatism. Conserve, preserve. Make sure that what you have don't get lost. That's the Western right-wing sentiment that you see right now all over the place. No left-wing golden futures. Right-wing preservation futures. Make sure you don't get poorer. Make sure you don't lose what you have. That's the sentiment we feel right now. Last thing, and I need to go a bit further. Where are we? Oh, here we go. Loss of resilience. So what we did in the past is exactly what we did in the last couple of decades. Whatever, for the first time in 50 years, Westerners need a grand narrative to be resilient again. You know what we did? For decades, in the last decades, we could afford abandoning all the religious and ideological perspectives that used to give us hope and consolation. I tell you why. You know why we gave up massively the Christian ideology perspective, the communist perspective. You know why we gave them up? Because for decades the old narratives could not offer us something better than we already had. You know, if you want an ideology to be appealing, it has to be better than what you have. If your life is good enough, you don't need it. So ideologies, religious perspectives, they couldn't compete with the level of wealth and well-being we already had. Look at the happiness index of the United Nations. We're just totally happy. Totally happy. What do you tell as a Christian to people that are happy, that are ranking 1, 2, 3, 4 on the list of happiness? But here's the thing. We in the West, we're very good at being happy, but we're also the first to get depressed and anxious when things go wrong. So the point is not that we are unable to be happy. The point is that we don't know what to do when things go wrong. And so we're facing not a lack of happiness, we're facing a lack of resilience. Now, and that, if you want to have a number, around 45% of both Dutch and Australians, so this is grouping us, bringing us together in the same misery, around 45% of both Dutch and Australians suffer from mental problems like depression or anxiety in their life. That's a big number. Now, before we start spiritualizing all this and we call upon all kind of stuff that isn't right in our brains and in our mind and in our thinking, you know, it would help if we just eat enough fruits and vegetables. So here's some statistics from the Netherlands. Before we think depression comes from lack of ideologies or faith, eat more vegetables. Before you think it's a spiritual problem, go to bed earlier. If you look at the Netherlands, you know, we need more exercise as well. I don't know about you, but 50% of the young are not having enough exercise. 33% of the adults doesn't help. And the other one is regular moments of recovery. 37% of the Netherlands is sometimes unable to work due to stress, especially young people in the 20s and the 30s. Lots of burnouts there. So before we go into spiritual issues or mental or thinking, whatever, there's another part that we can fix by simply addressing these things. But here comes the other part. If you look at the Netherlands, citizens say, I'm okay, we are not okay. Citizens in the Netherlands can be happy with their own lives, but they're very pessimistic about society as a whole. Same here. It's good with me, it's just not good with us. Something is wrong with our country. Lots of pessimism about our country, but if you look at their individual lives, pretty okay. Here's another one. 40% of the Netherlands adults indicate they can feel lonely. Again, there's no plan B in terms of social care for each other. And then there's the last one, which is a recent PhD study. And it says 80% of the Netherlands indicates they're happy, but only 37% of the people indicates that they're flourishing by also living a meaningful life. So there's a huge difference in the Netherlands between being happy and between having the feeling that you are living a meaningful life. Isn't that interesting? I tell you, the lack of resilience is exactly this. We're not having a problem with feeling happy when we can be happy, when things go well, but we don't have a plan B when things go wrong. We can't fall back on a sense of meaning when things are not in control. We don't have a meaningful perspective to put setbacks, risks in place, in perspective. We can't put them in perspective. We lack the perspective to get ourselves through setbacks. Because there's only one gospel that we preach to each other, and the Hollywood film, pick a random one, and it will always tell you the same thing. If it's going to be, it's up to me. The thing that we say to each other, on, again and again, is you have to make something of your life. And the problem is that we are getting into situations where we can't fix our lives, where we don't control our lives. And precisely when you're in a situation of setbacks and risk, where you don't control your lives, you want to still give it meaning. And if you don't have a perspective that gives meaning to your life, even in difficult circumstances, that's where you get anxious, fearful, and depressed. Anxious, there it is. That's the moment where you get anxious and depressed, when you can't give meaning to your life when things are not in your control. And that's why I think we start needing to work on that. That brings us to this, and then we go to the prophetic one. Here we go. Prophetic storm, recapturing for the first time in 5,000 years. The whole world needs to work together to get the whole planet in order. For the first time in 500 years, the West needs to share its power and wealth with the rest. And for the first time in 50 years, see how easy I make it for you. For the first time in 50 years, Westerners need a grand narrative to be resilient again. Okay. If we don't invest in some resilience, our mental and emotional empty-handedness may turn out to be very costly, if not dangerous, for Western societies and beyond. What inspires in stormy times? Not a lot of words. What inspires in stormy times are inspiring people who live what they believe in. And what is that, what they believe in, that makes it inspiring? I give you 7 features of that which can be inspiring in a storm. 7 features. And I think we have reach a point where being inspiring in our days equals being prophetic. Because if things are not going well, if you face setbacks, if we face things that are not in our control, and we can still be inspiring, we somehow have a particular faith that we refer to. We somehow have a particular spiritual, mental strength that can make us still inspiring. And whether you call it a secular faith or a religious faith, I don't care. It's faith. You have found a way to withstand your biological responses and be inspirational to others. And inspiring people are not the ones giving into biological self-defense mechanisms, I guarantee you. Those are not the ones that go into world history in the books. The ones going into world history are the ones that respond to the following 7 features. Here's the first one. If you think of a storm, what is the most obvious, inspiring thing in a storm? Totally obvious, no-brainer, no rocket science. Here it comes. Stay calm. Stay calm. Friends, those who have the strength to stay calm in a storm are inspirational. The ones who panic don't go into history books as the hero. The ones who stay calm and have the strength to still look for creative and lasting solutions in the storm, they are the ones we want to find, we find inspiring. Stay calm. But why would you stay calm? It's because you have a particular faith. Whatever it is, it gives you the strength to hold on, stay calm. Somehow, you have the faith that things are not spinning out of control, that things are still manageable, fixable, that there's still reason to hope for better things, and that's what you communicate. And this is why you're inspiring. Here's another one. Very, very, very prophetic and very inspirational in the storm is when you're not using your energy to save yourself, but to look for the ones that are hit the most in the storm. Inspiring people are not the ones that use their energy to save themselves, but they have the strength to look around and look for the most vulnerable and say, well, I'm not the only one being hit in the storm. Where are the ones that are being hit the most? And if you have the strength to care for them rather than caring for yourself, and the last one is the biological one, what if you have the spiritual strength to take care of someone else, even though you have 1,000 reasons to take care of yourself? If you're still able to take care of someone else, that's when you enter the world history books. That's inspirational. It's even prophetic, because why would you have the strength to look beyond yourself? It's a spiritual thing, it's a faith thing, you call it what it is. There we have it. Stay hopeful. What makes us hopeful? There's only one thing that makes us hopeful, and that's when we have the ability to have faith in the future. Why would you have faith in the future? Good question. Why would you have faith in the future? What if you could communicate, if you could still communicate in your words and actions that this world is worth investing in? Those are the inspiring people. People that don't give up, but think this world, this creation, whatever you call it, is too valuable to be given up. I'm continuing to invest in it. I give my best strength to make sure this is the world we all want to live in. If you can counter pessimism, if you can withstand the cynicism of a particular nation, and you can stay hopeful and keep investing, that's where people start finding you inspirational. Not the ones whining. The whiners will not go into the world history books. The ones stop whining and work on something. Invest in something in the future. Here's another one. Stay visionary. Inspiring people withstand short-sighted answers to fear and discontent. Staying visionary means looking for the most sustainable solution. Not going for the short-term answers to your fear and discontent, but looking for what are true solutions. Solutions that last. And this is the thing in our time, in 2017, that true, lasting, positive solutions are planetary solutions and not national solutions anymore. If you really want a future that will last, that is constructive, that will provide opportunity, not only for the rest, but also for your nation, think global. So we have to stay visionary, inspiring people, seek the well-being of the entire planet and all nations rather than pursuing a protection and expansion plan for their tribe only. Biology has an answer. Stick to your tribe. Where are the people that can think beyond biology, and look for answers that are beyond bloodlines, ethnic lines, religious lines? Where are the ones that can truly think global? Here's the next one. Stay stubborn. You know, there's a lot of peer pressure in our society. It's easy to give in to peer pressure. If you hear whining, fear, discontent on a daily basis through your social media, try to be optimistic, try to be positive. Very difficult. So inspirational are the people that can withstand the whining of society, that can withstand social pressure and stick to what they believe in and who they believe in. Consistency and loyalty turns them into beacons of hope and directions for others. If you keep doing and acting upon what you believe in and who you believe in, that's when you become reliable. If you keep changing because opinion has changed, if you keep adopting your own ideas to your surroundings, you're not a beacon of anything. You're just wind. And the direction of the wind will decide what you will do. But if you stick to what you believe in, and if what you believe in is inspirational and you stick to it, you're not only inspiring, you become reliable. People start looking to you. What would he do? What would she do in this kind of circumstance? And that would be a new example in society that people could thrive on and derive perspective from. For next one, stay human. Oh, that's a difficult one. We love sociological boxes these days. We're all put in a particular box. You're either young or you're old. And I can tell you in the Netherlands, we have parties for young and for old people. Separate we love political parties. We have more than any nation in the world. I think we had last elections 27 or 28 parties. We love parties. So we have parties for young people. We have parties for old people. We have parties for the poor, for the rich. We have parties for higher educated, for lower educated. We have parties for, what is it? I always don't know what to do in English, but for immigrants and for the rest. We have parties for every sociological category. And you know, all these categories don't meet. The young don't meet the old. The higher educated don't meet with the younger educated. And so there's no Netherlands. We're a divided society. We're just a group of sociological people with the same passport. We're sociological categories just that happen to be together because they have the same kind of passport, saying the Netherlands on it. Who are the bridge builders in society? The ones that can get out of their sociological box and be human among humans. And I say this also to Christians. Some Christians define themselves as not being Muslim, not being atheist, not being agnostic. I'm Christian because I don't fit in the other sociological boxes. I am Christian because I have a particular set of ideas. Well, that won't get you to the other side of the ocean. What gets you to the other side of the ocean, if you are first of all a human being, liking to be with other human beings? Suppose me being a Christian means only this, that you somehow embrace the idea that God is looking upon you with favorable eyes. And suppose that is inspiring you to look upon others with favorable eyes. Suppose that's the whole definition of being Christian. You can be friends and humans with everyone. You can talk with everyone because you don't see Muslims, atheists, agnostics. You just see human beings. And you are comfortable with yourself and you are sure enough about your identity to reduce yourself to being a human being rather than the sociological category and talk and relate to everyone. Suppose we have a couple of these bridge builders that can be the glue in society and overcome all these bridges and all these gaps in society. Suppose we have a few of them, highly inspirational. Because you know what it radiates? If you can talk with everyone, it radiates strength. You know who you are. That's what it radiates. If you don't know who you are, go back in your tribe and you will find out some familiarity with some other bloodlines or people. That's what we do right now. We go back into our ethnic, sociological boxes because we don't know who we are. The bridge builders in societies know who they are. Let me just, running out of time. I need to give you this one research from an Austrian researcher. He studied 7 biographies of young people in Europe deciding to fight for ISIS. And he was looking for the common denominator. So what's going on with these 7 people? Were there joint features? Were there features that popped up every time? And there were 2 things that keep coming back, that came back again and again. And you know what? They had nothing to do with Islam. In fact, the ones going to ISIS knew the least about Quran. Because the ones who knew more about the Quran, they would immediately see that ISIS were not telling things that were in the Quran. So the good Muslims, the scholar Muslims, so to speak, who knew what was in the Quran, they wouldn't go to Syria. You know the ones who would go to Syria? The ones who didn't know who they were. The ones with an identity crisis. The ones who needed a sense of belonging, a sense of meaningful living. The ones going to Syria were the ones that were looking for meaningful living, for a meaning in life, and for fellowship, for being part of a greater community. And the other thing that kept coming back was these young people lacked a father figure. Isn't that incredible? They lacked an example. They lacked a leading person in their life. And so can you imagine? Those were the reasons for a lot of people to go to Syria. Not religious ideas, basic identity ideas. And basic lack of family ties that could give them a sense of belonging. So start with that if we really want to be sustainable. And here it is, last one, stay joyful. Friends, we're in a bad shape if we can't celebrate the good things in life anymore. Inspiring people can keep celebrating the good things in life, especially when facing setbacks. Inspiring people are capable of drinking a good glass of wine in the midst of misery. Inspiring people don't deny what is wrong, but hold on to a sense of gratitude for anyone or anything that points them to the gift of life. There's a kind of joy that can be embraced with tears. And that is that in the midst of setbacks and risks, you can still celebrate that you're not alone. That there's still something good in the world, in creation, that is indestructibly good. That no evil can destroy. If we can fall back on the good things in life, we can take a lot of burdens upon us. But we will have to charge our battery first. You can't bear a lot of responsibilities in life if you don't charge your battery. How do you charge your battery? By falling back on the good things in life. You know, there's this tradition in a lot of cultures where the start of the day is in the evening and not in the morning. You know, what's the first thing with sunset? What's the first thing you do when the day starts at sunset? What's the first thing you do? Let's say around 6 o'clock. To make it easy for you, you smell it already? A good meal. Suppose the day doesn't start with the morning, this annoying alarm, cereals that take too long, traffic, and feeling immediately the burdens of the day. Suppose it starts in the evening with a good glass of wine and with fellowship. Suppose it starts with that. And then the interesting thing is, if that's the beginning of the day isn't over. Then you do something for yourself, or playing football, whatever. And then you go to the end of the evening, and then what you do? You have to fall asleep, which is a piece of art for some people. You have to fall asleep. When do you fall asleep? As a Christian, I would say when you can give the whole planet back to God. More secular, when you can simply let go. If you are able to let go, you can fall asleep. So whatever spiritual background you have, we all need to charge our battery. And we can only charge it by first falling back on the good things in life and then letting go. It's not our planet. And then you have enough energy to deal with all the burdens of the rest of the day. Isn't that a simple way of looking at things? But the lesson is this, and if you can manage to do this in the morning, go ahead. But this is the lesson. The lesson is we will have to charge our battery when things are not going well. You know, misery, setbacks, risks make you only need more celebration. It only increases the need for celebration when things are not going well. We need to get back to joy in our lives. We need to withstand whining, complaining. We need to get back into a mood where we can still fall back on the good things in life, because things become very miserable. If your burdens, if your evil, if your responsibilities, everything that puts, that puts pressure on you, if that starts to define your life, if that's your life, it's a miserable life. If you can fall back on good things and say, but in the midst of this, I'm still able to celebrate, that's where you become inspirational. In World Vision, you know what the most inspirational people are in World Vision that we meet in the world? Those are the people that have 1,000 reasons to be depressed and are still joyful. Those are the most inspirational people. Those are the ones that go into the books. The ones that have the strength to keep the joy in the midst of setbacks. And so, friends, this is what I want to end with. These are 7 prophetic stands because they refer to some faith, however you define it. They refer to some faith. And it's a strength, and I think we are in a time as a Western societies where we're entering a time right now where we need to invest in this kind of inspirational living. And if it can't be today, try tomorrow. And let's try to encourage each other, because let's face it, fear and discontent are contagious. But so is joy. If one starts laughing, the rest can't stop laughing. Laughing and yawning are very contagious. Laughing included. We need to laugh and the rest will start laughing as well. Come up with the best jokes about Australia. Well, I think you're already good at that. Come up with good jokes about yourself. That helps. The group that was the most persecuted in Eastern Europe, which group? The Hasidic Jews, they had the best jokes about themselves. You know what was the highest virtue of them? Joy. You know what they did when they didn't have to work? Dance. So all these good things. I think we need to look for the counter tools to withstand things that are uncomfortable today. And if we do that, I think we become very inspirational, and that's what we need today. So thank you so much for your attention.
Go. Well, thank you, Evert-Jan. That was just amazing. Plenty to think about. But we do have an opportunity now for some questions. We don't have a roving mic, so we're not a huge group here, so we can, if you'll speak up when you ask your question, if you don't mind, I'll repeat that. So we are recording this, so I'll repeat it, and then Evert will endeavour to answer it. So, Andrew.
At the start of your talk, you mentioned about working more globally, and I'm thinking about bodies like the United Nations and those more, global kind of bodies. They seem to be working less than they used to be. Yeah. My impression. So, can you what those bodies and what's happening to them? Yeah.
So the question is around global organisations such as the United Nations. But they seem to appear to be doing less now rather than more, and so what?
So the United Nations wasn't founded to make decisions. It was founded to talk. Because if you make a world organization, you have 2 choices. Either you make sure you only have the people at the table with the same right and wrong ideas, and then you can make decisions. But you need an ideology of right and wrong. You need to agree on what is right and what is wrong. Then you can make joint decisions. That's not what they did. What they decided when creating the United Nations, they decided that everyone should be on at the table and talk together. And so they didn't agree on a joint language of right and wrong, and the monsters and the angels could both sit at the table. And this is why it is not a very effective entity to make decisions, not only because of the Security Council, with this ridiculous non-representative group of nations, it's also because it's not decided. It lacks a common ideology. And it's the only one we have. But I tell you, the power of the World Health Organization will rocket up as soon as there's a pandemic, because it's the only entity we have. So we might want to adopt it in the future, depending on crises, but it's not an ideal organ. We still have to come up with something. Kofi Annan tried, didn't work.
Another question?
In the research, is there different reactions and responses to the situation across the generations, or is it fairly consistent in the West, whether you're a millennial, an ex-boomer, or whatever? Yeah, have you seen differences in the way people are responding to this kind of storm?
So the question is, in the research, is there a difference between the generations in the way in which they respond to this kind of perfect storm?
Of course there are differences, because the one has just started and the other one is finishing off. So you have very different perspectives. The insecurity is the same, even though the baby boomers can still lean on a system that is still working. It's getting a little bit slightly smaller, some minor adaptations, but not too painful for the current generation. The younger generation, the millennials, they face double insecurity, because they can't fall back on the leftovers of an old system. They will have to hope that the pension system will also have something for them in place. And so it's security all over, but different ones depending on generations.
Yes. Yeah.
Would you like to comment perhaps on Geert Wilders and the Brexit?
So comments on Wilders,
Geert Wilders.
Geert Wilders, or whatever it is,
No, Geert Wilders. Geert Wilders.
and Brexit.
Geert Wilders. Okay, well, Geert Wilders is just it's the smaller version of Trump. It's just Trump minor, Trump the second. It's the same phenomenon. It's just being a relief to some by providing simple solutions to complex problems. There's a lot of wishful thinking, even though some people may not totally believe that what he's suggesting is doable. It sounds too good not to be true. So there's a lot of wishful thinking where people would support populist ideas because it's so attractive to believe them. Because life is so overviewable. Things are so complicated. Things are not national anymore, they're global. A lot of people simply, it's too complicated for a lot of people. And then there's this politician coming up with glorious, simple solutions. Just abandon the Quran. Just kick it out of the country. Just pretend it doesn't exist in the Netherlands, and there you go. Just forbid the Quran. Those kind of wonderful, glorious, simple solutions with no side effects. And so that it's a temptation of the simplicity in very complicated times. We will have to learn to live with complexity. Otherwise, these populists will always be very attractive and compelling. What they claim cannot be done. What they want cannot be done, but even higher educated people sometimes can't resist the temptation of believing them, because at least they say something that points in the right direction where they want it to go. Brexit, sadomasochism looks weak compared to the self-destruction of the English right now. They are totally in a self-destructive mood right now. They have no idea what they are ruining right now, because as an independent economy, they're nothing. But they don't realize it's a kind of post-empire complex. They still think that they can get away with some kind of commonwealth, which would include you, that they somehow think that they can get away, that they can still leverage their position against 27 other European nations. So you think, UK, that you can have a proper negotiation with 27 other countries? You really think that? And so what we see right now is a kind of total self-deception because of wanting to believe that there are simple solutions. If I'm in the UK and I ask the taxi driver, tell me, what do you think of Brexit? The answer I heard a lot was, finally we have our sovereignty back. That's the biggest illusion in 2017. No one is sovereign anymore. There's hardly such thing as national sovereignty. Most of your well-being and your doing is decided by the rest of the planet. But it's a wonderful idea to believe in. So it's, unfortunately, these are the consequences of disillusional but very compelling clarity.
Andrew, and then Greg.
I'm not quite sure what my question is, but I'm sort of thinking through Judeo-Christian ethic. And if you look at what your timeframes are, the last 500 years has seen the rise of a Judeo-Christian ethic that's been kind of a dominant ethic in the world, giving us human rights conventions and things like that. With the rise of groups like China and India being the dominant forces, what kind of impact does that have for that Judeo-Christian ethic? Does that get lost? Does human rights get lost? Is that part of the complexity that we're just going to have to deal with? Yeah.
So the question is, with the last 500 years seeing a Judeo-Christian ethic, which has produced such things as human rights, with the rise of the East and the New World Order, is there going to be a subsequent change in the way in which we view those issues?
No. Okay, friends, we keep the joy. The world is inevitably going to be less democratic because we don't control the world's thinking anymore. Less of economic power means less grip on people's thinking. And the rising powers are less democratic than we. And so the world will become less democratic. We will start thinking more Chinese about democracy, inevitably. Because you won't realize it. It's because you buy products. It's because you want to trade with China, so you adapt. If China is too big to ignore, you want to trade with China, and if talking about human rights blocks you from earning money, and you stop talking, you're already adapting. The Chinese know already for a long time, the West is immediately stopping talking about human rights when it starts costing money. We only talk about human rights when we don't have to pay a financial price for it. As soon as it gets to get expensive, we stop talking about it. Our silence is already an adaptation to China. And so our human rights to the East don't have any authority because we're not backing it up with paying the price for it. But hey, if China is authoritarian and getting away with it, that inspires Russia. That inspires Erdogan. That inspires the guy in Hungary, a guy in Venezuela. And what you see is the chain reaction of examples setting the wrong example. And so once countries can get away with authoritarian behavior, it undermines the moral authority of democratic thinking. And so what we see right now is that democracy is still, I would say, the worst system ever invented except for the other infant systems. It's still the best one we can come up with, and I think it will stay that way. But it doesn't mean that everyone buys it, and that every country can simply adopt a democratic system. And so what we see right now is with the shifts of power, less democratic countries are getting more powerful and will make the world less democratic. And there are other reasons for that, but economic power pretty much helps people's thinking, influences people's thinking. We will start thinking more Asian. Prepare for it, whether you like it or not. Now, good thing to remember, the Chinese are not fundamentalists in their culture because they love and thinking. They're not either or thinkers. They can combine. And if democracy turns out to be of pragmatic value, they can simply become more democratic. They need practical arguments. And they are also having a Confucianist heritage, which also matches better with Western thought than Hinduism. So there are some hopes on the horizon. The Northern Hemisphere could still be a strong area of democracies, but don't get too picky about collectivism and individualism. because the Eastern democracies will always be more collectivistic. We will be more individualistic, but we will also become more collectivistic. We will have less patience in the future with individuals that deviate from the social norm. And that will be partly under Chinese influence. You will have to adopt more in the future, and we will have less deviations in the future, because we start thinking more collectively and thinking about collective interest. Get ready for it. You don't have to be depressed about it, because we were way too individualistic. So some Chinese influence might actually do as well.
So the question is around... Now the question is, given those 7 prophetic stances that we should take, how do we reconcile that with politicians and those in power, and increasingly bigger numbers in power that reflect the opposite values? What should we expect?
Wow. Okay, we're still in a democracy. Them is us. Them is us. We're not a monarchy. Trump is not a king. So the next one can be a better one. There's no way that it will help us to be pessimistic. This just doesn't help us. There's only one way forward, and that is we try our best individually, try to inspire others to create a counter movement of hope and compassion barriers. There is no alternative. And yes, the transition will be messy, because we're not out of 19th century thinking yet, including thinking that war will help. So we're still in transition. We still need to upscale our thinking, start thinking global, not be afraid to lose some sovereignty for the greater good. All these things still need to happen, and it will be messy in a way that these things go in a bumpy way. But there's no point in being pessimistic and giving up. There's just no point. So the only thing I would recommend is, in times of feeling pessimistic, drink a good glass of wine and start celebrating as well the good things of life. Because these things that we're concerned about don't determine the entire life we're living. They're not the total definition of our life or the total description of our life. There are other good things, and we have to fall back on that, to have the courage and the strength to stand up and be inspirational again. There's no plan B for that.
Just time for one more question, and yeah.
Professor, you said that for the West to become resilient again, they needed a new grand narrative. Yeah. Where are we going to find our new grand narrative?
Okay, the question is, if the West needs a new grand narrative to be resilient, where are we going to find that narrative?
Yeah. So it's not like you sit like Marx in a library for some time and you cook up communism. It will not be like a theoretical exercise. What we need is, there's a starting point for a grand narrative, but then it's a starting point, it's kind of starting question, and then the way you work that out will lead to different implementation forms. And the basic question is this: on what kind of planet do you want to live a couple of decades from now? That's the basic question. It's a question that includes all nations, it includes ecological systems, it includes the entire planet. That's the starting point for any new grand narrative. What kind of planet do we want to live in? And then you, of course, you will have basic data that everyone will have to use in that grand narrative. And then, of course, you will have already different interpretations, but you will have these different parameters that you will have to work with. And then you will see that there are more right-wing ways of answering that question, more left-wing ways of answering that question, because you can always differ from how much income you need to donate to the government. You can always differ about that. So there will always be left and right-wing variations. But the question for the future grand narrative is always the same. What does the planet look like that you want to live on? And I'm saying it because we have to get rid of 19th century thinking. The solution is not that you fixed your nation. The solution is the well-being of my nation depends on the well-being of the other nations and the entire nature, ecological system that we work in. And so once you start thinking that way, we will come up with solutions and we'll come up with ways forward. And there will be suggestions for political systems, like alternatives for the United Nations, something that will represent 7 billion people without having 7 billion people going to the voting, what is it? Voting stuff.
Would it be possible to ask that grand narrative question a different way?
Yeah, please.
Instead of asking, what do we want this planet to look like in 20 years' time, isn't the question, what does the kingdom of heaven look like?
Well,
And
what?
For those of us of Christian
Right,
faith,
right.
Does that not provide us
Yeah.
with a grand narrative?
Okay, then let me give you a kingdom of heaven answer. I think that is the same question.
That's what I'm suggesting.
That is the same question. God is a globalist in the Bible. You know, when he calls Abram, he says, through you all nations will be blessed. Somehow Abram had to care for all nations. He wasn't supposed to be happy about God blessing him. No. Through you, I want to bless all nations. Matthew 28, when Jesus is giving some advice to his disciples, he says, you know, disciple all nations. Paul having a future for the glorious creation, you know, of all creation being restored in its glory. It's always a world vision. It's never one nation that is the lucky one, be favored by God, and then, you know, you will have your premium service from God. It never happens. The interesting thing is it's always about the entire planet. And so the best that the Bible can offer in terms of end times perspective is, I think, Isaiah 25, where God is having a party with all nations. So do you want to have the final picture of God? He's having a good glass of wine with all nations. And there's peace on earth, and everyone benefits from it. Justice and peace live on earth. You know, those are the pictures. So I would say, you know, join the club. Some would call it kingdom of heaven, but it doesn't exclude you from the conversation with all the others that talk about the planet. It's the same thing. God's kingdom is a planet that is functioning and flourishing according to the principles of peace and justice. Same thing. So 7 billion people can talk about the same grand narrative.
Thank you. Was a really important question.
I had an answer to this. I just wanted to put an answer
Okay.
to this latest question, and it was because Evert's discourse filled me with a lot of hope in thinking that the storm is actually the norm. When we look at the narrative of the Bible and we situate ourselves with Israel, it's a small dot in a large constellation of empires. It was always the norm that it was chaos all around it, and at a very brief period in Kings we see Israel at its pinnacle, but for the rest of the time, it's the storm. It's kind of our narrative too, that despite the storm, we're heading into an unknown future as a very minor player in Asia, and yet God calls us to all these principles in the midst of the storm.
One comment.
That's very good. That's very good. And it reminds me of saying, you know, I was talking only about a few Western countries that are nervous. There are other countries that are now seeing new opportunities, that have a totally different perspective on what's going on right now. They're also winners of globalization. They're in a totally different mood. Their mood is hope. But we all need to fix the planet. Whether you're fearful, discontentful, or hopeful, we all need to get together. And that's the struggle we need to cope with. We need to overcome ourselves to think bigger, but you're totally right, it's of all times. And we need to realize that we're not the representative of the planetary inhabitants. We're a bunch of Westerners that have to deal with our own losing power issues.
Well, thank you so much, Evert. Let's thank Evert for stimulating. Thank you once again for coming out and joining us for this very informative lecture. Evert is an employee and works for World Vision. If you want to contact Evert, contact World Vision. They may be in Australia. You can Facebook Evert. So Facebook Evert and follow him. Evert is in Australia off and on over the years, and he will probably be more than happy to come and chat at different times. So if you want to contact Evert, follow what he's doing, follow some of his lectures, please do that on Facebook. And thank you once again for coming tonight. Enjoy the rest of your evening.